All right, welcome back, everybody. A lively show. I hope that we are making both Michaels proud. I'm Tiffany Cross, as we said at the beginning of the show, host of The Cross Connection, airing on MSNBC every Saturday, 10 to 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, joined by my nemesis, friend, colleague, the poor man's Tiffany Cross, Dr. Jason Johnson. He has been doing great work filling in across the network on a lot of shows on MSNBC, and I'm so thrilled. I think we're both thrilled to be joined by, really, I would say the king of Black Twitter, maybe, Michael Harriot. If you guys are not familiar with Michael Harriot's work, I encourage you, I implore you to follow him on Instagram and Twitter. His tweets, Michael, the tweet that you did about Freaknik, I laughed so hard. Do we have time for me to read this tweet?
Yeah, you guys got to bring that tweet up. I have to read it. It was an American classic.
Yes. Okay. I'm just going to read this tweet really quickly that Michael Harriot, and stay with me guys here. This is Michael Harriot's tweet. Freaknik went to college, bought a house in Atlanta, in parentheses, really Alpharetta, joined a grad chapter, got a master's while raising 2 kids. Her youngest just got a full ride to Spelman, but she hates when anyone calls her Freaknik. She goes by Essence Fest now. Her FICO score is 773. Brother, the brilliance that you do, that is both hilarious, informative, educational, but also a little inside baseball to us, is so dope. How are you, my brother? So happy to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. Although I do have to admit that I was really excited that this was going to be a meeting of the Michaels when I got the email, and then I saw that like it was just going to be you two who I talk to all the time. Yeah.
Well, you have to come back. You'll have to come back when they're on. And I have to say, I am excited about your new podcast. Well, you have a lot going on, so I'll let you talk about it. But I just saw a promo with you and W. Kamau Bell this morning and on your Instagram. And I tell folks to go and follow you on Instagram. You have a lot going on at TheGrio. So tell the folks what you got going on at TheGrio.
Yeah, we just started on Juneteenth. We debuted a new daily podcast called TheGrio Daily. And it's basically just talking about, instead of kind of regurgitating the news, we pick one topic and go in depth and talk about the history of that thing and how to think about that thing instead of just explaining what happened.
I think that's so amazing. I mean, it's kind of like the Vox, really, of podcasts. I think that's so dope. Sorry, Jason, I cut you off. Go ahead.
One of the things, this is the other thing about Michael that I find particularly interesting is the sort of the breadth of things that you cover. Because I just saw you in a documentary about the history of Black comedy. And I thought that was absolutely fantastic. I learned a lot, actually, in part 1. I didn't know as much about Dick Gregory as I ended up learning. I learned some things about Richard Pryor, the whole Party Records segment. Like, I remember my parents talking about Party Records. Tell me a little bit about your knowledge and how you got connected to stand-up comedians and, like, how you learned about the history of sort of Black stand-up. You're not a stand-up yourself, right? So did you just study the rhetoric or what?
I'm not a stand-up comedian, but my favorite art form is stand-up comedy. I use it in writing. I use it in podcasting. And so I studied it, and I studied the culture. I've been a fan for the longest time since I was a little boy, and I got in trouble for listening to Richard Pryor tapes in church. I always found it interesting that it is an art form that we created, and it's become a thing that is worldwide now. But when you look at the history of stand-up comedy, it's a Black creation that comes from, and this goes back to my podcast, the history of TheGrio.
I love that.
There's even a thing there. Can you talk about this? What was it? The term punchline? Like punchline, the term is actually from Black folks. You were like, because I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, Charlie Case was the first Black comedian. And he had a nervous twitch, and he used to play with a string on stage, but there were times when he couldn't find a string to twiddle with his hand on stage. And during those times, when he got to the part of the joke that was the end, he just nervously hit his fingers, and punched his arm, and it became known as Case's punchline. And how we perform stand-up comedy now is based on Charlie Case eliminating music in the band. It's like he was known, they didn't even have a term for it then. They called him a monologuist or the man who talks, because they didn't really even have a term for what Charlie Case did.
Wow. I think this is the amazing thing of all the hats you wear, Michael, that you can find the through line in all of these things. Because even some of your Twitter threads, I mean, that is new age journalism. Like, you are informing the masses, and you're doing it from a very unapologetic standpoint of this is our history. And it's interesting that you're among us at a time where there's concerted efforts to try to deny us our history. So you are just invaluable. Having said that, I would love to get your take on this TikTok swirl channel feed. Jason sent around, this is something he wanted to talk about. I did read the Washington Post piece on this about how lucrative this is for interracial couples to kind of parade their families. And they make money off of it, and people like it. And different people gave their take. Some people in the article are saying, we get a lot of racist comments. And the interesting thing, I thought they said that most of the racist comments that they deem racist come from white men and or black women. So Jason, I know you have a lot to say about it. But I'm just curious, you brothers' thoughts on this whole TikTok swirl channel.
I think the reason, I guess, interracial TikTok or swirl TikTok has become famous is because, like, seeing black people do normal things with white people is endearing. Like, endears black people to white people. It makes, it makes us seem like normal, like a human being, where you have to have, like, you two have even heard it when someone, before they explain why you're wrong about something concerning race, they'll explain that they have a white friend, or they dated a black guy in college, because, or they have a black niece or a nephew, or they adopted black kids, because that, proximity to blackness is the only connection a lot of white people, and there's studies and statistics that show this, 79% of white people live in neighborhoods that don't have a black person in their neighborhoods. Whereas, everyone else in America, every other demographic lives in much more diverse neighborhoods. And so I think that's part of it. And I think part of it is that, online in the social media world in general, when people comment on something, it's usually negative. Nobody says that was good, right? Like, you just laugh at it, or you send it to your friends, but nobody takes the time to type out a comment and send it to the person who made that. So most of what you're going to receive, if you put stuff into the public sphere, is going to be negative.
And see, Michael, I want to add this because Michael's making a good point, especially with the way that a lot of your tweets go viral. Part of it is people like us who are interested and find what you say interesting, but part of it is people who get mad. And what I thought was fascinating about the article, quickly, is just this whole idea of, like, people's denial about what the drive is. The analytics in social media are driven by attention. They don't care if it's good attention or bad attention. There was a great tweet that came out right before this article that said, hey, just because you're an interracial couple doesn't mean you're an influencer. Some of these people are legitimately interesting, or they're legitimately funny, or they just have adorable kids and you want to watch. But some of it, they know they are capitalizing on how people fetishize and the anger or the passion about those kinds of relationships. If I can work out online all I want and say, hey, people follow me because I'm a fitness guru. No, it's because they think I'm hot. I didn't teach them how to do squats. Some of these people are being followed because they create content, and some of it is for fetishizing.
Can I just say, there was one clip, and it was a black man married to a white woman, and it was kind of funny because he was, like, putting on skin cream, and he was essentially saying, I got to make sure my wife stay young because black don't crack. And it's true. I just came from Essence Fest, and there were women coming up to me like, I just turned 65, and they look like me. And I thought, Lord, let me have whatever you have. But I will say, the reason why I think there's sometimes backlash from black women outside of society constantly teaching us that we're unattractive, unlovable, unmarriable is, Jason, don't start with me with your endogamy rates. I'm telling you, there are times where, I'm just saying, there are times where black men, certain black men, not all, but some black men will go out and find someone who mimics our culture. Like, the white girl can twerk and she likes hip hop. So that makes her cool, and we look at it, or the Latino woman, or the API woman, whichever. And this is no diss to the women by any means, but men will look at that, and it's like, she is mimicking the culture that I create. And you would rather have that because you choose to identify with anything but blackness. And that, I think, drives a lot of, it's not rage. You know, black women aren't sitting around in our feelings crying because somebody else got it. But it does sometimes. We look across the divide and we're like, y'all look absolutely ridiculous doing that sometimes. So that's all I'm saying.
I will say this as we go into break, and I wish we could have this tweet. I do understand sometimes when it's rage, because, you know, I don't know if you guys saw that viral tweet that came out last week of the interracial couple jumping the broom. I mean, there were lots of people who were, it was a black man marrying a white woman. They were jumping. People were legitimately mad about that. Like, that was legitimately something to be angry about. So anyway.
He looked ridiculous. He looks ridiculous.
They really look crazy. Anyway, we got to go to break. Michael, we definitely want to have you back. It's always fun to talk with you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave, and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.